Welcome to Chat. My name is Paul Spanos, and today we have with us Harry Malos, the clinical counselor. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you, Paul.
And we're going to discuss that peculiar thing that happens every time we have a festive season, specifically Christmas time, that people might not feel that happy and might feel more depressed than they should have. And the emotions, they're really high at that period of time. Is there really a problem for people, Harry, in that during that period yet?
Definitely. Statistics show a large scale of emotional depression and anxiety during festive period, especially during Christmas. And
that negative emotion, because that's a negative emotion to feel depressed during Christmas, where do they come from? What are the possibilities that they come from?
Well, one of the major issues and the possibilities of why it's more salient during that period is because of their expectations. The expectations are of what Christmas is portrayed. It's a warm, fuzzy family environment where everybody gets along with everybody, and that's what is portrayed on television and in newspapers. And when they can't live up to that, then they feel depressed and sad.
Okay, which is going to be, that means if I have a family problem, that will be magnified at that period of time.
Yes.
And how about financial reasons as well?
Yes.
I'm thinking the financial reasons as well will be,
of course,
I can't afford to buy gifts.
Yes.
As much as I would like to.
Yes. And
the expectations of others from me.
Yep.
And a lot of people, they have lost, I mean, even the family members during that period, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
The memories is quite painful.
Yeah.
But what the expectation you're talking about means for us, the expectation in our own minds, isn't it? But the environment helps as well, isn't it?
Sure. The environment in this particular festive period is heightened. So, you know, we as human beings are all involved in relationship, whether we're with family, whether we're with friends, whether with relatives, work, and so on. This environment of getting along and having a stress-free environment is highlighted during the Christmas period in particular, because that's what we see portrayed. And when we don't live up to that image, then we start to feel sad, then we start to feel neglected or lonely, more so than in the past.
And we're going to talk later on about some sort of remedies of practical solutions. What can we do to avoid that?
Sure.
But having that emotional, how can we avoid coming in?
Well, we can manage it. It's not like avoiding it. There will always be issues centered around relationship. Okay. All relationships have their issues, as you know. Yeah. But yes, what we can do is to actually learn to function in those environments, in those times when our expectations are high and our emotions are shot all over the place.
Because a lot of people in our society, they do live on their own. Talking about not only single parents, we're talking about students.
Yes.
That they leave home early, and we're talking about elderly.
Yep.
And a big portion of our society, they do live on their own.
Yes.
And that will be tough for them.
Yes. Again, they live on their own for 12 months, but it just seems 12 months of the year, but it just seems that during the festive period, that's accentuated. Yeah. And it's not about stopping those times when they feel that way. It's a bit like being afraid of the storm or learning how to dance in the rain. It's the way you view it, that it's the weather is still stormy, it's still raining for most of the period, but how we manage it is the way we overcome those emotional high periods of festive periods.
Is it the advertising? But the advertising is throughout the year, but specifically that seasonal.
Yes. Specifically during, if you look at a lot of Christmas advertising, it's about a warm, fuzzy image of family and a pet and outdoors and a lovely barbecue with all the surrounding features. Some people don't have that.
Which is far away from their own reality.
Reality is that the expectations that they watch and see on television, they can't live up to them.
Okay.
Now, the reality is that they don't live up to them for 12 months of the year, but during the festive period, it is more heightened.
Because it is quite tragic to see throughout the year, there's not as many suicides, but in that period,
yes,
exacerbates.
That's right. It's exacerbated during that period, definitely, because they cannot regulate that emotion. They can't reach those expectations. There's no way that they can find support during that period, and so they tend to. Suicide is higher during the festive period. That's for sure.
It's like somebody gives us a bit of a measurement that we cannot reach at that point, and we feel absolutely disappointed and disillusioned because we just feel impossible to reach that.
Yeah, well said, Paul. And I don't want to turn it to theological, but if we look at the real story of Christmas, it's a story of poverty. It's a story of neglect, and that's the real Christmas. But commercial has taken Christmas to mean something else, to mean plentiful, to mean that we buy each other expensive presents and take great holidays and have beautiful houses. But the real story of Christmas, as you're aware, is one of poverty, You're
talking about shepherds, you're talking about those who came from afar, just the little boy, born in a manger and all that.
That's correct.
And then all of a sudden we turn it into a rich and famous sort of story, which I'm not.
Yes.
And a very, very good point, because really that indicates the distance of reality of Christmas and the Christmas we end up expect to celebrate, isn't it?
That's right.
It's far away.
It's different. It's a different story. One is commercially based, giving us an image of what we should be like, and the reality is that we're not like that.
We did speak enough in relation to how this happens and why it happens. We're going to continue shortly. Please stay with us. We're going to continue about this problem and how we can find some practical solutions. Welcome back to our program, and we're going to continue with the topic of Christmas season and people feeling not as happy as they should have been. But Harry, you mentioned before in relation to the real story of Christmas, and can this real story be connected in today's everyday person? That could be homeless, could be an asylum seeker, could be someone who lost his job, or he feels sad because he needs to visit his father or the mother or the sister in hospital. In those situations, how the story of Christmas can connect with those people?
Well, it's a very good question, Paul, because what the story of Christmas and the festive period of Christmas is portrayed is nowhere near to the real story of Christmas, and the real story of Christmas is more relevant in today's society and in today's world, because
we're talking about the Son of God. I think he was an important person. What do you mean?
The real story of Christmas is related to how a lot of communities and a lot of families live today. It is more reflective of reality than the one portrayed on the screen or on television, because the real story of Christmas is about a young family, and in particular a young child who they were homeless, they were deprived, they were rejected, they were marginalised, they were hungry, and they were in that environment where society did not accept them. That's the real story of Christmas.
The music was more related to the marginalised today society rather than to the affluent society.
Absolutely. That's the real story of Christmas, and how even in that period of portraying what the story is, how it has changed in effect, where it's about affluent societies, about expensive presents and having things that only money can buy. Well, that's not really the truth of the story. That's what's portrayed. And because of that concern, a lot of people struggle and a lot of people have emotional sadness and depression. But if they can identify with the real story, then they are simulated with someone who understands them. Okay. The Christmas story has a meaning to them because it touches their own life, it touches their own wound, and therefore they don't feel like they are not related to what is really Christmas.
But quite often, even if you have the means of life and you can buy expensive gifts, and you're losing the spirit of Christmas again because you forget the reality of Christmas.
Exactly.
There's on the other side as well.
That's very true. Just because you may have the affluence and the money, it doesn't mean you're going to be happy and at peace and at joy. In fact, what research shows is those who do have all those that you mentioned, all the wealth and so on, are necessarily happier. They're not more at peace. It's the families that have and understand what their poverty is, understand what the spirit of Christmas is. It's those who are connected with each other, connected with the environment that they're in, the reality of where they're in, rather than wanting an extra holiday or an extra car for Christmas.
I mean, we already imply here that focusing more to the story of Christmas, the way it is written,
yes,
and the story of Christmas helps us more to feel comfortable during the season rather than watching the environment that we live in, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly. And the reason is because it can identify with our wounds. It can identify with our pain. Okay. See, we know that the story is of poverty and hunger and being deprived.
He had to go. Christ had to go as a baby to Egypt with his parents.
That's right. Yes.
Before he come back again, because otherwise he would be.
That's right.
He would be killed by the king.
What we call those people today asylum seekers. Yeah.
And he was in a life-threatening situation.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I'm suggesting is that if we understand what the real story of Christmas, then the expectations of what is portrayed in the media won't have that effect on us as much.
And we're going to realize we don't really need money to feel the story or to be part of the story.
That's right. Yes.
And then we can do it without sort of the expectations. We really touch some elements of the solution in here, but again, we can't escape looking at the environment that we live in, isn't it?
Yes.
We can't escape. And Christmas really brings a lot of memories. Memories to some of us will be from the childhood, the happy childhood that we cannot repeat anymore.
Yes.
People that we used to be together and they're not around us anymore.
Yes.
We moved ahead to different
That's right.
places and all of that. But those high emotions, what would be the first step to try to protect myself for feeling too heavy?
Okay. So you're talking about when you are in a state of sadness or depression or something like that. What are ways of helping to cope with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in that period you can't avoid the emotions to come.
No, you
the
can't.
Memories.
No, that's very true. Well, there's a number of ways that you can manage that. You can't avoid it, as we said, but you can manage it. And usually I find that when sadness or depression or anything that's negative comes to us, it leaves a fingerprint behind. It leaves. So if we become aware of that period when we engaged in sadness and depression, what actually helped us and what didn't help us, because it leaves a footprint, so we know that we can recognize the kind of emotion that we felt. And by recognizing that emotion, what we can do is say, well, hang on, what helped me during that period, or what didn't help me?
We're going to talk about that footprint in a moment. Please stay with us. We're going to return after a short break. Welcome back as we continue the discussion related to the holiday season and when we don't feel that good as we're supposed to feel based on advertising with Harry Malos, clinical counselor. Thank you, Harry. Let's start with what we spoke last in relation to the fingerprints that events from the past leave in us, in our emotions.
Yes.
And they all of a sudden they come up on a surface.
Yep.
And for example, if I let's start with practical ways. If I lost my father during Christmas period, and all of a sudden I have to pass through this period again, and that those memories become fresh, not in my family anymore.
Yes.
Do you have any suggestion for that person?
Yeah, sure. Look, death, it has to be explained in terms of that is part of life. And we can view death of a close relative, of a friend or a loved one, in two ways. First of all, we can view it as a sadness, as a longing that we miss that person, which makes us feel sad, and it makes us feel negative towards that chronicle period where we miss them. Or we can look and celebrate the life of the person. We can look at it and say what joy he brought into our lives, the warmth, the love that we had. So viewing it that way can have can bring out good emotion, positive emotion.
Can become a comfort instead of...
Yes, but viewing it in another way, in a negative way, it just brings us sadness. And you know, there is time for sadness and mourning, but beyond that period is if we live there, if we live in mourning, then it creates a problem. And yes, suggesting that depression and emotion does leave a fingerprint behind of a memory, we can use that as well. We can use it to say, when it happened, what did help me during that period? What made it worse? Because depression and negative emotions do tend to leave a fingerprint. And that fingerprint is an awareness of what has helped us and what hasn't helped us. And by identifying the things that have helped us during that period, we can use that as a way of lifting our spirits up.
That means we avoid to use avenues or ways or things doing that really bring back the pain instead of the good experiences we have in the past. What happened having in the community? There is quite a few divorcees that they just got divorced or something, and they go through this period and becomes really strong to them. What would you say to them?
Well, a separation is a sad time, whether it's Christmas or not, particularly with someone that you've been married to. It is a struggle to get through that period in best of times. And for every individual, it means different. So whatever is the struggle for that individual that is highlighted, one of the things that we encourage is for that individual to actually have someone that they can trust, they can validate their emotions. If we hide our emotions and don't actually express them,
that means don't be with the person that criticizes you all the time.
No, you need to have someone who can trust you. You can trust. And then when you express your emotions, it goes a long way towards healing, because it's a tough time.
It is a very difficult. That's why I bring them up now, so we can discuss some. Are there any things that it is a good idea to avoid during that period?
Sadly, Christmas and festive periods are associated with a lot of parties and alcohol. And sometimes the alcohol can be used as a cover-up to cover an emotion that we feel in our hearts, and it's sad. So we cover it up. It's like a little bit of a Band-Aid. The problem with a Band-Aid fix is that it's still there when some time passes. Alcohol may numb it for a little bit, but once the alcohol wears out, the issue becomes stronger. because we haven't dealt with it.
That means with alcohol, are you going to? Can we put any sort of bad habit sometimes that we inclined to fall into?
Yes.
Even for gambling to using drugs, and that would be the similar effect.
Yeah, very, very similar. A very good question, because usually I've spoken to a lot of people who are alcoholics, and they tell me they don't even like the taste of alcohol.
Yeah.
So it's not because they enjoy it that they engage in it. It's because it helps them or removes them from a memory or a thought or an emotion they're not comfortable with. It's a cover-up. And it's the same with gambling. Gambling takes them to another place where they don't have to think about something that's not helpful or that's hurtful or that's emotional. And it's the same thing for any other form of addiction. In most cases, addiction has that. You do something in order to avoid the memory of something else.
But having said what we said so far, but we imply here in our conversation that we can pre-plan for better Christmas rather than not planning at all, and we fall into emotions without having control stops or something.
Yes, you can become aware of that Christmas is another time, like any other time of the year, where some of the things that have happened to your life existed before Christmas, before the festive period. But because of this expectation, the rigid expectations we have, those problems become stronger. So firstly, to say, well, the issues existed in the past. They still exist now.
Correct.
I managed okay in the previous 11 months, I can do the same if I think about it in that way.
And then in Christmas context, we discussed in the previous segment that returning to the original story is going to be more comforting to me, that I feel the pain in this period of time, rather than to those who have too much.
Yes, it's liberating, as you suggest.
It is, because it really we can identify ourselves with the story of Christ much easier, rather than to a rich person.
Yes, exactly. What we call that is when you touch the wound of somebody else, you identify your own issues, and that helps you cope with them. The Christmas story is a beautiful story.
Yes.
It's a story where, apart from the fact that it gives us hope for the future, but it also identifies with the real world today.
Absolutely. And thank you for being with us. On that positive note, we can suggest that the reality of Christmas is closer to our own reality.
That's
in our
right.
hearts and emotions and the spirit, rather than the environment that we live in.
Exactly.
Thank you for being with us. We're going to talk again, and to our viewers, have a happy Christmas, have a happy festive season, and we're going to see you again next week at the same time.